For those of you that kind of maybe haven't been with us for the last, month or so, what we've been doing on Sunday nights with our young adults is we've been sharing testimonies, stories of who God is. Because I believe that we should always be ready to preach. Not that you are going to preach some 3-point sermon series or whatever, but man, we should always be ready to share who God is and what he's done in our lives. Give witness of who Jesus is. And I also believe that as soon as we say yes to Jesus, Jesus sends us to share, to preach, to share of who he is and what he's done. So let me share with you a little bit of maybe the irony of this evening. We had a young adult scheduled to share her testimony tonight. And she also got scheduled to work, and the person she had to cover could no longer cover. So I got a text message yesterday just apologizing, sharing, I can't get anyone to cover my shift, and so I am not able to share Sunday. So I apologize. I have been serving all week at our kids ministry camp up in the mountains. I just got back today at like 2 o'clock. And so I was able to get that text message up in the mountains, which was sweet. So for the last 24 hours, I've been saying, okay, God, what do you want to do? Ironically, Matthew, one of our young adults, was also at the kids ministry camp serving. And Matthew asked me yesterday in the dinner line, hey, who's sharing at Haven tomorrow night? And I said, well, right now, no one's sharing, Matthew. Would you like to share tomorrow night at Haven? And he graciously said he would think about that, I believe, to some degree. And then today, before I left camp to come home and shower, I said, Matthew, what do you think about sharing tonight? He said, I think I might be able to manage that. So, in the spirit of always being ready, this is as last-minute ready as you could be. So, Haven, would we please love and celebrate Matthew for stepping up in less than 4 hours and saying, I think I could outline my story and my testimony. So, Haven, please welcome Matthew as he comes to share his story with us.
Yeah, I got home at 2:30 from kids camp, took a shower, and then I spent like an hour cobbling together a rough outline. So I ask for you to bear with me tonight. I'm a little bit out of it. I'm working from a rough draft, so this is going to be a little unpolished. So I'd like to go ahead and open up with a quick prayer. Dear God, I just pray that the story I tell tonight is not the story of Matthew. It is the story of you working through me, Lord. Amen. So I was born into a Christian family and basically grew up going to church every Sunday. And somewhere between 10 and 12, I was in the bathroom one night feeling sick and just cried out to God to take my suffering away, I guess is the best way I can put it. And so immediately I felt, like a weight had been lifted off of me. So I went downstairs, told my parents, and then got my Bible and went back to my bedroom. And I was filled with doubt. This is weird, but that's what it is. I was filled with doubt and questioning, what I'd done and whether or not, I was really doing this from the right motives and whether it would, I was really saved if I hadn't done it from the right motives. And so that kind of stuck with me for a while. And so as I grew up and wrestled with, the doubt of, whether I was really saved or not, and heard other people's testimonies, a lot of what I heard was God speaking to people in very tangible ways. And so that wasn't something that I was experiencing. And so on top of the doubt I already had, I ended up with this feeling that, I wasn't being a Christian right. And rather than reaching out and try to get help and do that better, I was ashamed of the lack of, God in my life. And so I kind of hid that and did everything I could to avoid telling my testimony because I was ashamed of feeling like there was nothing to it and that there should be something there. So pause that thread for a moment and back up a little bit. I went to Reading Christian School from like pre-K to middle of third grade. One of the things about Reading Christian School that they did is they required every student upon entering the first grade to have a Bible. And so my parents gave me this Bible on August of 2001. So this Bible is now 21 years old and has been the paper Bible that I've used ever since. And so you'll notice that for being a 21-year-old Bible given to a first grader, that's in pretty good shape. And I actually had somebody compliment me on this a couple months ago. And that was actually an embarrassment to me because part of what, as I grew up and I was struggling with, my relationship with God is this Bible sat on a shelf most of the time. I might take it to go to Sunday, but during the middle of the week, it just sat there on the shelf unopened. So my sister, upon entering the first grade, was given an almost identical Bible. Her Bible fell to pieces in the interim because she used it all the time, and mine sat on the shelf. So when somebody complimented me on what a good condition my Bible was in, it was not, okay, you've taken really good care of this. It was, to me, it was basically, I haven't used this enough. And so, but partly it's also, God is still there. He's still waiting for me. He hasn't changed. And whenever I come back to him, he's going to be right there ready for me. So picking back up in my story. Grew up, became a young adult, kind of just kept living life, said I was a Christian, believed in God, but it was a God who was not a God of personal relationships. It was a God who arranged circumstances in my life to achieve things, right, in kind of impersonal ways. Have any of you guys seen those comic strips where there's like a person who's like either really unlucky or really lucky, and they walk through life and they're like a complete klutz, and things just kind of miraculously shape themselves around them so that they have either a really good outcome or a really bad outcome? It's kind of what it felt like God in my life, right? He was this impersonal person shaping the things around me to guide me where he wanted and not really being a personal connection with me. So last year, I was going to a small group, family group, church in Red Bluff, and unfortunately COVID kind of just dissolved it. And so I was left looking for a church, and I ended up finding Haven and starting here in about February of 2021. So 2021 kind of ended up being the year that my life got rewritten a little bit, a lot of it. So it started with going to a new church, and then in June I changed jobs, and then in like August, September, for the first time in my life, I moved out of my parents' house and I'm living on my own. And so, growing up, I grew up in a very tight-knit family. So it was the four of us, my parents, my sister and I. Extended family was out of town, like a 4 or 5 hour drive to go see them. So that was kind of an annual pilgrimage. And that was really the only time I saw extended family. And my family didn't have a lot of relationships with people outside of our family. So when they moved out of town to Chico, I had very few relationships. The relationships were with the people at work. I just changed jobs, so they're new relationships. I just changed churches, again, new relationships. And I really only had like a couple friends in the area that I was in regular contact with. So, I move out by myself. The craziness of moving kind of settles down, and the central thing, the thing that had been central in my life up until that point, which was spending time with my family, is now gone, right? And so I'm left doing kind of the things that I used to do, like reading, watching TV, playing video games, and they just felt empty, pointless, and like, yes, they filled the time, but at the end of it, I didn't really have anything to show for the time I was spending. Not that any of those things were bad or anything, it just, they were empty to me. So kind of looked around. I'm like, okay, I need to find something that actually has meaning. And what can I do? And so, and partly I was just, like, if I don't do anything else, I'm going to sit at home and do nothing, right, by myself. And I was getting tired of doing that. So looked around and decided to start trying to connect at church more. So Eric started his night in the park things, went to that. That was great. That kind of wrapped up. And then they started life groups in spring of this year. And so I signed up for life group, partly for the social aspect, partly because it was free dinner that I didn't have to think about cooking one night a week. And partly because I was feeling like I needed to do more with my faith and just let it sit on the shelf. So in life group, there was kind of two things that really hit home for me out of that life group. So we were studying a book called Celebration of Discipline, and one of the sentences in that book that really stood out to me was, "We are first a body of sinners, not a body of saints." Most of us tend to think of the church as a body of saints, people that God's sanctification process has been completed in, right? And so that was part of what I was struggling with, was just like, I had this feeling, and I don't know why, that like if I really wanted to be a good Christian, the first step I took needed to be perfect. It wasn't acceptable to make a first step and have it go wrong. I needed to jump from being not very Christian to being like completely Christian in one step, which is, as you guys are probably well aware, completely impossible. And so the combination of, and part of what they elected to do in my life group was have everybody share their testimony. And so my initial reaction was like, oh crap, I don't want to do that. But thankfully, I ended up getting picked, I think, about 2/3 of the way through the group. And so I got a chance to hear the other young adults in my life group share their testimonies. And thank you guys. That helped me realize that walking out your life as a Christian, it's okay to stumble. It's okay to mess up. It's okay to make mistakes. God's gracious. God works through that with you. And so that helped me move past, some of the points that I've been stuck on for years. And so for all the people in my life group, thank you again. That meant a lot to me. Sorry, let me catch up on my notes here. Okay, so I didn't get asked to tell my testimony, and I did tell it. I don't know what you guys in my life group here heard, but what it felt like to me was a hot mess. Like incoherent rambling, no clear point, and I just kind of ended up trailing off without a good conclusion. But I got through it, and I was able to move on. And so part of what had kind of happened in a similar time frame is they started in the announcements, the LCC 2022 Mexico witness trip came up. And sitting in church, that came up, and it felt like God put it on my heart to go. And that was a little bit of a surprise to me. It wasn't something that I'd ever done before. And, I'm still kind of held up on sharing my whole testimony thing here, right? So going on a witness trip, kind of with the idea that you're going to be sharing your testimony, is a little bit like, okay, this is outside of my comfort zone, God. But, like, okay, I'll do this. Don't really have a good reason not to, so I'll sign up. So I signed up, and we started preparing. And one of the things they talk about is having us write out our testimony, right? So again, I'm sitting here trying to figure out what the heck is my testimony. Had a conversation with Pastor Nathan. Thank you, Pastor Nathan. That was, again, tremendously helpful and moving me past, things I've been stuck on for years. Didn't really end up with something that I considered usable for sharing in Mexico, but it also didn't come up while I was in Mexico. Sorry, catch up with my notes again here real quick. Oh, okay. So in preparing for Mexico, there were two things that caught me by surprise. One was, I was expecting to be very nervous and very anxious about, like, okay, how am I going to share? I've never led anybody to Christ before. How am I going to be able to do that? Am I going to mess that up? And I was completely surprised by the fact that I had peace through that entire. I signed up like 2 months, right? So I had like 2 months to stress and be anxious about it, and I just had peace. And so I felt like that was God working in my life, giving me peace about doing the things that He had asked me to do. And then the other thing that surprised me was the Saturday before we left. I'm packing, getting ready, and I've spent a fair amount of time, like I'm sure we all have, on long-distance car trips, right? And I'm conscious of the fact that this is going to be something like a 16-hour drive to Mexico, and I'm going to be stuck in a van. And if I don't want to be bored out of my mind, I need to bring stuff to keep myself entertained for 17 hours or 16 hours, right? So start packing for Mexico, and that Saturday, I had this odd sensation that Saturday was God's time. It wasn't my time, it was God's time, and that I needed to be focused on packing or praying or just getting ready for Mexico, right? And so partly I kind of felt like He was saying, you don't need those distractions for the car drive. Like, really, God? 16 hours in a car, and I don't need anything? So I kind of, I like to read and I like to listen to audiobooks. So I kind of went through the catalogs going, okay, what do I want to take? And kind of nothing came up, right? So I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going without anything. I hope this doesn't turn out to be a mistake. And so show up, get in the van, and we all kind of snooze a little bit for the first couple hours. But I ended up being super blessed. I had amazing people in my van. And so that entire 16-hour drive down, we just talked. And it was I wasn't bored. I got to connect and hear the stories of the other people in my van. And it was just an amazing time of community and something that I was unprepared for. And so that was just a really amazing thing. And then we had a 20-hour drive coming back, and same thing. I wasn't bored the drive. I just had some amazing community time with the people in my van. So go down to Mexico. It's an amazing trip. If you ever get the chance, and God tells you to, by all means go. It was life-changing for me. So part of what I came back with was kind of a couple things when I got back and started processing, what had gone on the trip and how this affected my life. I was left with, it shifted my perspective on just how richly God had blessed me, particularly like as an American. So LCC has partnered with Pastor David down in San Vicente for a number of years, and like his father before him. So in total, we've been partnering with the same people in the same area for something like 20 or 25 years. And so going down there, part of what I expected was that this is the missions fields, right? We're going to convert people to Christianity and start churches. Well, in hindsight, it's now obvious, but when you partner with somebody for 20 years, it's not church planting that you're going down to do. And so Pastor David has an amazing heart for reaching out to the people in Mexico and spreading God's good news to them. And so they're preparing for an upcoming missions trip. And so I think they were doing a raffle to raise money for this trip. And so one of the people in our group, let us know about this and passed around, kind of a collection for them. And so out of what I can only describe as the pocket change that people happen to have, a group of about 40 people happen to have in their pocket at the time, we managed to raise $300. And that, to us doesn't sound like a lot, but to them, it was a huge contribution to that missions trip. And that was kind of the first thing I noticed is, okay, what to us is not much is a huge blessing to them, right? And then I'm sitting in Pastor David's church one morning and looking around, and I just kind of in the back of my mind, calculate, okay, he probably has about 30 people attending his church, right? And then mention some figures for what people down there made. And so I did the math, and what I ended up realizing is that the income for the entirety of Pastor David's church is probably about roughly equivalent to what I make every year. So what they make, his entire church makes in a year, is what I make in a year. And that really hit home in terms of just how richly I've been blessed by God. And so when I get home, and hearing Pastor David, and he's raising money to support this missions trip on, probably something less than what I tithe every year, it's like, I just have been so tremendously blessed. I have a duty to steward the resources that God has given me well, in both money and in time. So coming back, it's like, okay, I've got time, I've got money. I need to figure out how to give those back to God because he's just so richly blessed me. And so partly coming back, just having lived a week completely dedicated to the service of God, it's like, my normal life isn't sufficient anymore. I need to serve more. And so part of what I'd done in preparation to go to Mexico was volunteer in Kids Zone because, I'd realized, okay, the part of what I'm going to be doing is the kids ministry piece of the missions trip, right? And it's been probably about 6 years since I have had any prolonged contact with kids, right? I'm not sure I even know how to interact with kids. So I'm like, okay, I'm going down to Mexico. I don't speak Spanish. I'm not sure I still know how to interact with kids. Maybe I should spend some time practicing, kind of missions with kids. So I signed up for Kids Zone. And so coming back from Mexico, it's like, with this need to serve, it's like, okay, I'm just going to continue doing what I already know, just so I'm serving something while I try and figure out, different ways to serve. And so that first Wednesday after I get back, I'm in Kids Zone. I'm just there to serve. I'm not expecting to get anything out of this personally. And they have songs that they play during Kids Zone for worship, right? And so, I'm there and I'm here to serve, and I'm not even really expecting to worship properly, right? Because I'm here to serve. But one of the songs comes on, and it's Thrive by Casting Grounds. And there's part of that song is this sentence: we know we are made for so much more than ordinary lives. It is time for us to more than just survive. We were made to thrive. And that just really hit home for me. Because, having lived up until sometime last year, kind of just this ordinary life, without a lot of interaction with God in it, and then going through Mexico and coming back feeling changed. It just spoke to where I was and where I'd been. Just really hit home for me. And then one of the other songs that they play fairly regularly is called God is on the Move. I don't remember who it's by. But in that song, there's one of the, I guess it would be a verse, is, in each and every nation, God is on the move. And so having just gone to Mexico and witnessed Pastor David's witness trip, and one of the things that we did there is, before we opened clinic, the first day I think it was, we all circled up, held hands. So it was, the Americans from our team, and then some of the people of the church we were at, and people translating for us. And so I got to hear prayers in a combination of English and Spanish. And it was just so powerful to see God transcend language and cultural barriers, and to be there with a group of people from completely different backgrounds, all there with one purpose: to serve God. And that he would bring together circumstances that would allow us to transcend, the language and cultural barriers and reach out across those lines to help people. And so, yeah, it just caught me completely by surprise, to be there and have these two songs just resonate with where I was at and what I was walking through at the moment. So God shows up in unexpected ways sometimes. And so as the worship team comes up, I'd just like to conclude by challenging you guys, if you haven't already, take the time to write out your testimony. Because for me, that has been tremendous in bringing me to a place, facing some of the things I was needing to deal with and working through those. And just, it's brought me closer to God. So if you haven't already, take the time to write out your testimony. And if you're not crying by the end of the process, you're probably doing something wrong.